Welcome back to another episode of the Institute Up Close. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us, as always, for these episodes is His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello.
Today's episode is titled Building a Mission, and I've only had small opportunities to interact, Your Excellency, with what was the King of Prussia mission, and now is in Pottstown, so experienced it in a hotel room, and just last Sunday was my first time in the new chapel, and I know so many people have volunteered and given a lot of their free time to help with that. But we've got to go back to the beginning, which is your familiarity with Pennsylvania, which dates back to the 1980s.
1970s.
1970s.
As soon as I was ordained, I was saying Mass in Pennsylvania. I was ordained in 1975, and yes, I said Mass in Pennsylvania under the aegis of the Society of St. Pius X for between 1975 and 1983. And then I continued to say Mass even after our split with the Society of St. Pius X in 1983. Continued to say Mass in Pennsylvania because some people were loyal to us in Pennsylvania.
And that was north of Allentown?
All over eastern Pennsylvania. Yes, north of Allentown. That chapel is still there. It is serviced by the SSPV.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a place called Nazareth. Just north of Bethlehem, actually, north of Bethlehem.
All these names.
Yes, well, yeah.
Ephrata.
Pennsylvania was a very religious place. And Hazleton I went to, Harrisburg I went to, Philadelphia area, just by the airport I went to, Williamsport. These are all you may not know these towns, but I know them, in eastern Pennsylvania.
So Old Stomping Grounds, did that inform...
Stamping grounds.
Stamping? Old Stamping Grounds. The idea of what the missions would be, did these experiences inform where you selected when you came to Reading, or was it demands of the faithful?
No, what put us in Reading, Pennsylvania was the suitability of the building. The building could not be too big, and also it could not be in the hands of the diocese. See, the diocese will sell us nothing. They would sooner burn it down or make a house of ill repute out of it rather than to sell it to us. That they absolutely will not. So it's always a problem. You're always stymied by that problem. You might see a good place, but they won't sell it to you. There was just recently a place in Pennsylvania that our sisters were looking at, but can't touch it because the bishop has to sign off. See, so, and this is as all of their things are falling apart. I mean, they are selling off churches. Buffalo just closed. As they're closing 69 parishes, it's an institution that is falling apart. Yet they hold on to these things as if. But anyway, that was one of the problems, and also those buildings tended to be too big for us. The maintenance on an old building, especially, is very expensive. And so it couldn't be too big. And the other factor was it had to be close to a big airport because we fly a lot. And people fly to us a lot. So we couldn't be in the boondocks someplace, in North Dakota.
Well, I mean, I would argue actually we're in an airport bonanza really around here. We have obviously Harrisburg and Philadelphia, but Baltimore is not so far away. Newark is not so far away, and JFK it's a little far away, but they're all within touching distance. So people have lots of options.
Yes, there's many options. So that was another big factor, and another factor was that the Northeast is a very Catholic area. A lot of Catholics in the Northeast. So I knew that in time we could go out and establish a lot of missions in a reasonable distance because. So many Catholics here.
So being situated in Reading, what led you to pick Harrisburg and King of Prussia originally?
Well, those are the two biggest cities within our orbit. Obviously Philadelphia area is loaded with Catholics, and so that was the first choice. But Harrisburg also, it's a seat of a diocese, so I mean there are many Catholics in that area. So it's that was a decision. They were both approximately an hour away, and there was there's other smaller cities like Lancaster and a few other, but we also had to think of competition because there's other people in some of those areas already. So you don't like to
Like Fraternity of St. Peter and other Latin Mass.
yes, or SSPV. You see, they're probably they pulled out of Hazleton, but CMRI is in Hazleton. So. But those are smaller cities, but still, you could probably find some people who are interested there.
So when you say find some people, what would have been a critical mass for you to say, I'm going to go to Harrisburg or I'm going to go to King of Prussia? I wasn't here when those first started.
Well, it's sort of a shot in the dark. I mean, you look at the Catholic population of the area, you see what the competition is. I mean, it's kind of a bad word to use, but as if the place is already saturated. And it'd be hard to saturate Philadelphia, though. So you try it out and you see if it works, and if it takes. Most of the time they take. Sometimes they don't. By take means that they are able to not only support themselves but also show sufficient numbers to make their mission worth the time of the priest. The general principle is the greatest good for the greatest number. So if you're saying Mass for 3 people, for example, in a certain place, and there might be 30 people someplace else, obviously the priest should give the attention to the 30 people rather than the 3 people. See, so it's kind of a cold way to go about it, but there are only a certain number of priests, and we just have to go by those rules.
I'm thinking of different situations, like in Fraser, the SSPX is there, and I think CMRI are further to the east, and so there's a big municipality, and it's sprawling.
Yes.
In Pennsylvania, I think there's the town, and then there's a lot of green, and then there's another town, and
Yes.
It's not at all like that. So
No, Pennsylvania is in that way denser with its towns. Michigan has has Detroit, it has Grand Rapids, Lansing. The rest of it is sort of, there's not really many big towns. There are a lot of little tiny towns.
well, you
I
remember
know-
those long drives to Traverse City.
Yes, I know Michigan. I think I've been to every tiny town in Michigan, at least passed through it, because I used to take the little roads rather than the big roads because I couldn't stand those freeways. And so, but Pennsylvania is denser and has these good-sized towns. I mean, something like Reading, something like Pottstown, so it has Catholic population. I remember those Catholics that were in Berks County. So it goes back a long way, so it's a different. Even Lancaster. I mean, Lancaster might not be a bad idea. It's all where you are and what the temperature is, so to speak, of what to do.
So you found a place, you know where you're going to go. How do you choose a hotel or a venue?
Well, it has to have easy access for one thing, and King of Prussia, all the freeways of Pennsylvania, I think, come through pretty much
Yes.
through King of Prussia.
Turnpike as well.
And the turnpike from New Jersey was easy, from all sorts of sources. So King of Prussia. And you have to find a place where you have privacy. You have to have a room, or at least a situation for confessions, and a place for the sacristy. It has to be dignified. So you're looking at not upscale places, but places that are a little bit better than, say, the local motel or something. And so there's things like that. So you just look around, and if it fulfills all the conditions, then it's good. It should be away from the swimming pool. It should be quiet. We had to move out of one of the place that we originally started in Harrisburg because there's so much noise in the hallway. We couldn't even.
A lot of cackling camelas.
Oh yeah.
In the hallway.
Oh, terrible. So yeah, it's hit and miss a little bit.
And I suppose the financial calculus for the venue is that the collection needs to at least cover the cost of
least, yes.
renting the venue,
Yes.
at least because if you don't, there's a loss and there's no chance to build up any kind of war chest.
Well, yes, but there's something called seed money in the sense that it might take some time for them to be able to cover their expenses. So you start out with hoping for the best, but eventually they have to cover their own expenses.
So, leading to this, the King of Prussia mission was around for a couple years before.
We started there in the fall of 2022. That's
so we're
around
in the
that time.
fall
So,
of 2024.
Yes, about
now.
2 years we were there.
And you moved to Pottstown, and not to be confused with Pottsville, which I think that's also a place.
That's northwest of here, famous for the Jungling beer factory.
Oh, yes. If anyone's interested.
Yes.
That timeline, Your Excellency, would you say that that was a good timeline, faster than usual, slower than usual? 2 years from a hotel
it
to a
varies.
property?
There's no usual.
Okay.
It varies. What's available and what you can afford, and location, neighborhood, parking, all those factors come in.
Well, and I think that's the issue is what's available. Before staying here, Your Excellency, I didn't realize what a real estate hound you were. People normally hire a real estate agent as someone to help. You are plugged in. You get the email alerts. You are prowling around looking for deals all the time. And I suppose, what is it that you're looking for? Obviously, it took you 2 years, I think, to find this property. So, finding
Actually, well, yes, but I usually look on the internet. This did not come up on the internet. Actually, a real estate agent whom I knew in the Philadelphia area alerted me to it.
okay.
And it was a very hot property. We had to move very fast on it because there were 5 other buyers interested in it,
Oh, wow.
but we won it.
Okay. So there's an example of you're normally prowling around trying to find
Yes.
a place, but this one you got through a connection. What were you looking for in the last 2 years? Because you were looking the internet for a place for the King of Prussia mission. What led you to pull the trigger on this one finally?
Well, I was looking actually for something closer to Philadelphia. One drawback of this building was that it was maybe 30 minutes outside of these Philadelphia suburbs, which is not ideal. But nothing came up in the Philadelphia suburbs that was suitable. And there were a lot of buildings, but for one reason or another, they were not suitable. Either they were too expensive because everything's expensive in the citified area, so, or they slipped out of our hands. One nice place did. It went so fast. Another place was it's still under contract. It's been under contract for over a year. That was a little north of Philadelphia, a place called Perkasie, a nice church, but only on-street parking. You see, parking is a major problem, and that is that all of our people come from a distance. Nobody walks to church.
So we've got to have parking.
You have to have parking, and on-street parking is on and off. I mean, if there's a lot of people, it's I looked at one church in Royerford, I think is the name, and it had. I mean, I looked at all the park people. It was like the cars were nailed to the street. I mean, it was just
Royersford is a little closer to Philadelphia.
Yes,
from
it is.
Pottstown.
Yes, and there was a good church, nice church, and but I had to turn it down because of parking. And the only parking that there was down by the river, and you would have to walk up a hill. A steep hill, and not everybody can do that,
Right.
And so I said, no, I can't do that. The price was right. Everything was good about it, but no. So you keep on looking. It's like fishing. You keep your line. I never fished my whole life, but I know.
Not even remotely interested
no,
either.
no, I think it looks boring to me. But it's like fishing, though, and you have to be patient, and you have to look, and something eventually comes up.
So there's a lot that I like about the current chapel and the Pottstown area as well. You mentioned the 30 minutes, but I also think this is a wonderful selling point for people who are interested in relocating to the chapel because they're within the Philadelphia corridor for jobs. There's lots of jobs in the area, so it's a reasonable commute. And There's parking, not just within the parking lot, but there's lots of street parking. You're not going to have to
Yes.
fight anybody for
Yes.
it. And there's a bit of land in the sense of no one's going to come bother us. There's some privacy
There's
afforded.
privacy. There's I would say there's at least an acre and a half there, which is, or maybe more.
One of the misses for me was not only the first mass at this new place, but I got to miss out on all the difficult cleanup that many wonderful, generous volunteers have had. I heard there was a 30-yard dumpster that was entirely filled and taken away
Yes.
of junk.
Yes. No, the parishioners have come forward very, very nicely, and to me, unexpectedly, I really didn't think that they would be so forthcoming. I don't know why. I just thought the seminarians will probably have to do this, and but they have been very, very good, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I know they're going to work on it tomorrow. I know one of them is working on creating a bit of a children's area downstairs for after the socials, that the children will have a place to play and be as loud as they want with the door closed. When you think about that, Your Excellency, I suppose that's part of the calculus as well. How much work am I going to have to do to make this
Yes.
usable?
Yes, that's right. That is. We had to turn down a property in Norristown because it had a submerged or buried oil tank, which typically leak. And the property next door was very dense. You could practically touch it. But, that means that if it has leaked on somebody else's property,
You're
you have a
responsible.
major. So I said, I'm not going near that. And no, it has to, in a way, it has to be perfect. I mean, in a sense, you have to have it. Yeah, there's a checklist. This property is in good shape. The building is in good shape, and we had it inspected, and there's no serious problems with it. The roof is good, and it's not too big. And see, it's 3,000 square feet upstairs and 3,000 downstairs. That's just about the right size for us right now. Now, eventually, we might have to sell it if it becomes too small for our congregation, or we might have to establish something else where it would take some of the traffic off of it. But that's down the line. So we'll see.
I'm also impressed by how quickly you were able to furnish things. See, I come around the right corner and there's a traditional old confessional like I would have seen in a 1920s church. The altar itself is lovely. The sacristy set is very traditional looking. You turned it into a Catholic church pretty quickly.
Do you know how many churches I've done that to?
Well,
I know all the sources, and
you know the people to
Yes,
to
yeah,
call.
Yes.
So I think you had said that the altar came from Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh area, a place called McDonald, which is outside of Pittsburgh, and there's a man and his son there now who the older man has been saving, going to churches and taking things from churches that they were selling off, and collecting since the 1970s. He said someday this is going to be valuable, and I think he has made a fortune, frankly, because he can get prices. Now that you see, we're
How
not
did
the
he
only
have that
buyers.
mission? He's not a Catholic?
He is a Catholic, yes.
Okay.
He's Italian.
Okay.
And
He knew.
Yes, he knew, and he says, "This is nice stuff. Somebody's going to buy this someday." And we're not his only customers. It's all of those Fraternity of St. Peter people. I mean, he's known everywhere, and they come through and buy things. And
He's the Fluminalis of this part of the United States.
Yes, Fluminalis. That's the same thing in
Different
Holland,
league.
but different. And also, fortunately, there was a place in Steubenville run by some nuns that we discovered by accident on eBay, who were selling off all kinds of things. And that's where we got the Belgian confessional, the hand-carved...
Beautiful.
I never heard confessions on anything so nice as that in my whole life. And various other things we got from them, the sacristy cabinet and so forth. So that Steubenville was only 30 minutes past the place in Pittsburgh. So it worked out. So we rented trucks and got the seminarians going, and they did a wonderful job, and we got it all in and it's up and running.
And I think there might be a tendency for some people to think, oh, you've arrived, you've got a chapel, but it's actually always onwards movement, that now you want to fill that chapel. And we were talking about this earlier this week, that the idea of possibly a school, that is one of the logical steps, is if you want to build up a community and attract people to move, because I thought of the choices you could have in the United States of where I would live if you don't want to be buried in snow 9 months of the year in Michigan, potentially, or you don't want to deal with hurricanes in Florida. I actually think Pottstown presents a very attractive competitor for young families who are starting out and think, well, where are we going to relocate to have access to the traditional Mass? That I think Pottstown could compete there very easily.
Yes, it's a nice area of Pennsylvania. It's close enough to the suburbs. I mean, you have major companies like Pfizer in Collegeville, which is only 20 minutes from that point. You know, if
Although
even that.
Pfizer might
Well,
not be.
yeah, but I'm saying huge companies.
Sure.
I mean, it's not just all in Philadelphia. It really comes out a lot. There's a lot of business around there, and so you could get a good job in that somewhere in that area, and not with no terrible commute. And they're putting a train in between Reading and Philadelphia that will stop in Pottstown, so you could get on the train and go even into Philadelphia if you want. You know, so so there's a lot to yes, and I've spoken to Father Bishop Selway, and we've talked about eventually sending nuns here to run a school, but that's another big undertaking. You have to have the proper building, and you need students. You know, you need a demand. You see, so it all has to come together that way. So, but we'll see. The thing is, we are, this fact that the seminary is here means that we are permanently invested in this area of Pennsylvania. So, and there always will be clergy here. You see, so we will never sell this place. So it has permanence. We are establishing our presence here for a long term, just as we did in Florida. And so it will eventually grow into something like Florida.
Well, I mean, I think, Your Excellency, as someone who was an occasional parishioner, because I do have a place I can go to Mass on Sundays here, that it feels a bit like a rocket ship to me, because we went from King of Prussia, Mass on Sunday, and the faithful are working to try to pull First Fridays off now by making certain guarantees of attendance. And so we've gone from Mass at a hotel to talking about making the First Fridays. I think part of what you've identified before is people feel a lot more invested in a property than they do in a hotel room.
They do, yes. Hotels come and go. And no, when you buy a property, you are making an investment in the area. In other words, we're going to be here for a long time. And so I think that idea of the seminary being here, I mean, that's something very permanent. And also, let's say the seminary has to move one day to bigger quarters. That's probably not in my lifetime, but with this building would always be a place, always be a religious house. It could be nuns, it could be brothers, it could be something.
Retreat house.
There will always be clergy here. So I mean, we have absolutely no plans of ever getting rid of this building. We put a lot of money into it to make it a religious house. We're not going to sell it. We could never get even a fraction of what we put in if we sold this building. See,
I don't think people are probably aware of how much investment you've had to.
A lot. All right.
And part of it is maintenance, but part of it, as you say, is how can I make this fit for religious use? And one of the adaptations I really love about this, actually, I haven't told you this, but the chapel where private masses are said, I just think that is so well situated, and there's quiet for the priest to say Mass, but it's also, I think, well, elegant and well done, and in the right area of the seminary. But you had to imagine that space. You had to enclose that space. It was a terrace before.
It was a terrace. There was a pool outside originally, and that's where people sat around on lounge chairs. And
you didn't feel that would be a good look for the seminary.
No, that was, the pool was filled in at a certain point, but that was what that area was. And we had to make use of every square inch of this building. And so we did that. And it turned out well. But, even more from the nuts and bolts point of view, we had to put in a lot of showers for the seminarians, because there was only one shower in one of the hallways. Well, that's because it was an old age home. Well, they can shower any time of the day,
right?
You see, so
probably had a schedule or something.
Yeah, but they have to be out in the morning, and so they needed sinks in their rooms and showers, and there was a lot of plumbing done, a lot of electrical upgrade, a lot of codes that we had to,
Sprinkler inspections.
yes, and the fire things that pertain to the fire department and everything. A lot of upgrades and a lot of codes, and so we have invested very heavily in this building, and we don't intend to move. You see, so that's, I think the idea is that this is not just a passing thing. I mean, this is a permanent thing here.
10 years of living in France, Your Excellency, and being part of the Paris mission there, and actually there it's the opposite. Parking is not so necessary. The majority of the faithful come by foot or by the metro, and so there's only a few that come from the area. But Father has been saving there because he really feels it's important to have a chapel in the capital. So he could have got a place maybe 30 minutes outside of Paris, but he really wanted to make sure there's a presence for the church in the capital. And so that is as you know, a longer process to find a property inside Paris that it could be reasonably priced. And they do have a chapel already that they own, but only seats 30, 40, 50 people at the most, and the congregation's 200 plus now at this point. And so knowing I was part of that congregation for 10 years, we've been in that hall the whole time, and coming here and seeing it go from hotel to property so quickly, and then seeing how that momentum can build, and a couple families can move here, let's say within the next year, and then that momentum can build, and maybe the sisters are able to find out what the story is about accreditation, and they find a building. All of that could happen pretty quickly, but I think part of that ties to, are the faithful engaged? And I feel that we're really privileged here in that percentage I've often noticed as I've traveled around the world and seen Catholic faithful is there's an 80-20 rule or a 90-10 rule, that the cleaning of the church, the locking up, the altar serving is done by 20 or 10% of the population, and the rest get
If even that.
They get to enjoy the fruits of that. And I'm
Yes.
always trying to encourage people in the 80% or the 90% to jump over and be part of the 20%, the 10%, 5% who are taking care of the flowers, taking care of the cleaning of the church. That people, I think, sometimes just show up and they think, oh, this all arranged itself. Right? The linens were cleaned. The purificators were cleaned. The flowers were arranged. Wow, isn't that wonderful? It was all done by magic.
I don't think they mean any harm. They probably just don't realize it. But some people have a lot of energy and a lot of goodwill. Others don't, but they do come to mass, and they're nice people. I mean, it's just.
But I think part of
some
that is,
people you don't even have to ask.
right, and I just want to recognize that
Yeah.
generosity.
Yes.
I think greatly appreciated by the clergy, certainly appreciated
Yes,
by
yes.
a fellow faithful of myself at the chapel, and I know all the hard work that goes into it, and I really appreciate that. Well, Your Excellency, I think the last question a lot of people have, Queen of All Saints as the name of the chapel, was there any particular reason that you liked this name, that you chose this name early on?
It was my father's parish in Brooklyn,
Okay.
Queen of All Saints, and he took me to Brooklyn once for some reason. I can't even remember, when I was a child, and he showed me where he grew up and where he went to school and everything, and he said that was our parish, and I remember that was Queen of All Saints. And so when I was establishing the various corporations, I remembered that. So for some reason, I always retained that. That was Queen of All Saints.
Well,
So
that's
that's where it goes back to. That church is still there in Brooklyn.
Oh, wonderful Easter egg, Your Excellency. A
Yeah.
bit of trivia. If anyone plays
Yes,
Bishop Sanborn
yes.
trivia, they'll be able to answer that question
But
as
it
well.
also, you naming a church for Our Lady says Catholic, Catholic, Catholic. In other words, it's if you make it St. Luke's Church, that could be Episcopalian or
Or
something.
St. George.
Yeah, it's Catholic. Queen of All Saints. It couldn't get more Catholic than Queen of All Saints.
It's a blinking red light
Yes,
signaling this is where
Yes.
you come for that.
Yes.
Although I was thinking in Michigan, I think there is a Our Lady Queen of Martyrs also, I think, nearby.
Yes, it's in Birmingham, which is a nice part of the Michigan suburbs. That comes from a beautiful church in Forest Hills in Queens.
Okay.
Because I always passed by it on Queens Boulevard, and boy, that's a nice church. And it was called Our Lady Queen of Martyrs. And I remembered that.
So watchers and listeners, you're finding out the New York origins of these names
And
of these
Most
churches.
Holy Trinity Seminary came from the chapel at West Point, because the chapel at West Point is the chapel of the Most Holy Trinity. And I thought, that's a nice name.
Wow.
And so I named the seminary for the chapel at West Point, the Catholic chapel, obviously, at West Point.
Well, I think our watchers and listeners will be very edified to find these specifically American ties to
Yes,
these names,
yes,
Your Excellency.
yes.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. I think a lot of people are obviously curious about the logistics of, well, how does a mission go from starting to progress, and this is still a work in progress.
Yeah, we always have the intention of obtaining a church. That's constantly. As soon as we start, we want to get a church. There's actually a church in Harrisburg that is available for $150,000, but we don't have that money right now. And it would be perfect for the people in Harrisburg if somebody in the Harrisburg area wants to help with that.
Well, I guess that would be my last question, Your Excellency, is when do you know? Because we've talked before on different episodes that some missions have failed in the past. The organizer moved away. No one else stepped up. I think that happened in Atlanta some years ago.
Yes. He didn't move away, just he couldn't do it anymore.
Couldn't do it anymore. And so when, I don't want to say when do you give up on a mission, but the idea is if there is no progress towards a property, as you're saying, there always has to be a movement towards that. When do you say, well, this isn't the greatest good for the greatest number, we're going to have to shift our resources elsewhere?
It's actually very rare that happens.
Okay.
Very rare. And I mean, my history.
Half a century, Your Excellency.
Half of them in my 50th year. In other words, I'm going to complete 50 in June. So I'm in my 50th year. I can think of one case, Atlanta. I can think of another case that I did not shut down, but Father Kelly shut down. Then Father Kelly, he shut it down for some reason I don't even know. That's all I can think of.
Gosh, so not even a handful is what you're saying.
No, it's very rare, actually.
Okay. So is there a timeline by which you would like to have a property? So let's say, would it need to be within...
The day after you start the Mass Center, you want a property.
But let's say it's been 5 years and you're still in a hotel. Have you experienced that before?
Yes.
Okay.
Hotels were the norm. I started saying Mass in a garage, Father Kelly's brother's garage on Long Island. I mean, that's where we started.
Right.
I go back to the old days. I'm the pioneer type. and so, yeah, the Holiday Inn was really, really nice, and I would go down to Delaware, and I remember that. So
I guess I'm thinking of Vero Beach, where there's people who are engaged, but the property is scarce there, and so you've got to kind of grab something as soon as it comes up.
Nothing comes up.
Right.
I look all the time, and I ask the very realtor. She is authorized in Florida, and I said, look for something in Vero Beach. She's the one that got us this property. Just look, because they have lists. Not everything comes up on the internet. There's a lot that doesn't, and so the realtors though have their own sites, and so I said, if you see anything, Vero Beach, Fort Pierce, they are dying for a church, and they can afford it, and so let us know. And but it's there's churches that come up south of them and north of them, but nothing around Vero Beach, and I feel sorry for them because they really we've been saying Mass there since I think 2015 or maybe 14.
And that was a 3-hour drive from Brooksville?
That's a 3-hour, 160 miles.
So a very serious commitment for the clergy.
Yes, I would leave at about 5:30 or 6 in the morning. Yeah.
And then got to drive it back.
Then drive back. Yes. It was a nice drive though, I have to say. I didn't mind it.
Well, we obviously keep the parishioners in Vero Beach, obviously, in our prayers for them to find a property as well, Your Excellency.
Yes. They've been looking and looking and looking, and I have been looking a lot. Sometimes they get mad at me saying, you're not looking. I am looking. I look all the time.
It looks 3 times a day at least, I feel like.
I look at Florida. Where are they going to get a church down there?
Right. And...
I mean, there's one available in Vero Beach, which is dog ugly, and they want over $2 million for it. It's just not suitable for us.
Well, thank you for walking us through this, Your Excellency, and answering that question that I suppose nobody really knew the answer to, is where did Queen of All Saints and Most Holy Trinity and all that come from?
Yeah.
Very appreciate that. As always, Your Excellency, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.